Welcome to the video, guys. The Premier League has joined with a bunch of corporations that are virtue signalling their life away due to the current situation going on in America and to a lesser extent over here. Well, as some of you might know, the Premier League restarted yesterday, and at the start of the game, not only did the players take a knee, but the referee did also. And of course, the media is all over it this morning, talking about how great they all are, when, let's be honest, these rich, privileged football players do not care about anything the BLM movement wants. They literally just need to look good on TV and social media. Can you imagine if one of those players just stood there and said, "You know what, I ain't doing this, I'm not virtue signalling my life away, I have a shred of respect for myself," as we heard from Dominic Raab earlier on Talk Radio, saying the only person he takes a knee to is the Queen or his wife when he asked her to marry her, which I would have to agree with. You will never see me taking a knee to anyone, that is for sure. Now, the BBC was gushing over this morning, as was the Premier League's Twitter account, where they show a clip of the Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola talking about how white people need to do this and that. So we'll take a look at that also. But first, we have a CNN article talking about the Premier League and the players taking a knee. It headlines, "Premier League players take a knee and make a stand." Premier League players take a knee and cuck themselves to the BLM movement. That is what it should say. With the eyes of the world on the English Premier League's long-awaited resumption, players in both Wednesday's game took a knee in a powerful and symbolic show of solidarity with the BLM movement. I am struggling to sit here and be proud to say that it's the English Premier League after what they did yesterday. The headline act on the day's Premier League return after a 100-day absence was supposed to be Manchester City's blockbuster encounter against Arsenal, featuring some of the finest players in the world. But the most memorable moment of action in both games, Aston Villa and Sheffield United literally got things rolling earlier in the day, took place before a ball was kicked in anger. No, it really didn't. The only reason you lot are calling that the most memorable moment is because you're a virtue signalling bunch of lefties that doesn't have a clue what the majority of the country thinks and assumes that everyone joining in with this movement in the UK is essentially just jumping on the bandwagon for a bit of virtue signalling points. I have seen it far too much now. Refereeing officials and coaching members of staff of the 4 teams involved in Wednesday's games also took a knee, while all the players wore shirts with their names replaced by the words "Black Lives Matter," a tribute to the movement which has grown in prominence since George Floyd's death. Since something happened in another country that has absolutely fuck all to do with us and the Premier League in general. But you might remember the hubbub there was a few years back when FIFA tried to ban poppies on the shirts, saying football shouldn't be political. Now, they are allowed to have poppies on their shirts, they are often embroidered into them, but the point remains. There was no call from FIFA on this situation, saying that it shouldn't be done because it's a political move, which obviously it is. This time, FIFA, the Premier League, FA and everyone just cucked straight away to the hard left Marxist organisation that is the BLM movement. On Tuesday, City and England star Raheem Sterling contributed to a short video with other major football stars explaining how they are tired about the manner in which black people are treated and represented. Says him, a rich and privileged football player with millions of followers who will likely idolise him. Can you believe this shit? And it's something I actually called out on Twitter the other day for the utter cringe that it is. I'm sure you would all agree. It's much like the celebrities singing Imagine or crap like that. Love that choreographed tribute, tweeted CNN contributor Darren Lewis in reference to when the players of Villa and United took a knee, which, it being choreographed, should tell you this is just virtue signalling on the part of the Premier League clubs. I am half expecting that the players were told to do this for a bit of virtue signalling on Twitter and a good bit of PR, which obviously it is. It's got all the major news networks talking about something other than their footballing ability, because now they are talking about how virtuous these football clubs really are. Now, let's think back to football clubs and how long they've been around. Most football clubs, to my knowledge, have been around since at least the 1800s, some a little bit later, but the majority of them are extremely old, so likely profited or was in some way formed using money from the slave trade that was legal at the time. The Premier League needs to be very careful, because once these lefty losers have finished with everything else, you can bet your bollocks to a barn dance they will be straight after the football clubs who have likely come from some form of background relating to the slave trade before the 1800s, when it was abolished by the United Kingdom. All players, including referee Michael Oliver, kneeling for a BLM tribute. At the moment, the eyes of the world are on the game after kickoff. Brilliant. No, it is cringeworthy on a whole new level, but unfortunately that is what we get from these organisations in this day and age, as we have seen over the recent weeks. And here you can see on this picture, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang actually looks kinda pissed off with Kevin De Bruyne because he's giving it a half-hearted kneel, which suggests to me that Kevin De Bruyne has been told to do this and really doesn't support it in the slightest, because, like me, maybe he thinks it's complete and utter bullshit. Now, before we end this video, as I said, we had a couple of clips, not only from Pep Guardiola, but also from the BBC this morning, completely gushing about it on BBC Breakfast. So, let's take a quick look at them before I end this video.
Also as well, coaching staff participated when everybody took the knee, the Black Lives Matter campaign. How much do you think sending that message out is so important?
Well, we should send 1,000 million messages for the black people. It's more than 4 centuries, 400 years to do what we have do for this kind of lovely people. So I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed for the white people has done for the black people. So just where you were born in an Afro color for your skin, how the people can think is completely different than the other one. So all the gestures are good, are positive, but you have to do it with facts. And hopefully in the next, I think it's not going to solve in a few days, but everything we can do to make conscious that is unacceptable in that period. And 21st century is still this happening, I think, not just in USA, in everywhere, all around the world. So we have to do a lot of things for the black people that we have not done so far.
Well, I think you will agree that is some god tier level cringe. The only thing that is embarrassing is these people here coming out and talking this utter shit. There is nothing we should be ashamed of at the end of the day. We have done fuck all wrong. Why don't you pop over to Africa and see what slavery is kicking off there now? How about the Arab world or certain parts of Asia where slavery actually exists? And they are still using white slaves, black slaves, and any fucking slave they can get hold of, you complete and utter ponce. And let's be honest here, the Spanish are not exactly well known for their tolerance of the black race. Let me tell you that. So before you sit there talking shit about the people of this country, why don't you consider the people in your own country and perhaps their own prejudice, much like, of course, a fair few countries around the world that feel the same towards the black community at the end of the day. The UK is extremely tolerant, so I really don't know what crap this guy is on about, and his embarrassed or ashamed is just laughable. You are an embarrassment to this country, to football, and to humanity itself.
Morning, let's catch up with Mike and this new normal phase. Mike, we saw for the first time football played domestically, no crowds, but we got a sense of what that's going to feel and look like.
Absolutely. There was a big debate on Twitter of whether people were watching it with the crowd effects playing on their TVs and radios, or whether just listening to that sort of rather surreal, echoey shouts of the players around the empty stadiums. But there was a very powerful statement at the start of it all. After a 100-day suspension, the Premier League indeed did resume with 2 games behind the closed doors last night. And the clubs say they were proud to stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement by taking a knee as their seasons restarted. And with those matches being shown live in 170 countries around the world. So after a minute's silence for the NHS and those who've passed away during the pandemic, all players and officials in both matches then took the knee and paused for 10 seconds. Black Lives Matter was also written on the back of all their shirts. Raheem Sterling, who's spoken out on racism this month, was among them.
Well, there you see it. As I said, it's god tier level cringe, with the BBC absolutely gushing about it this morning, much like Pep Guardiola was last night, though slightly more reserved and not saying they're embarrassed for the entire white race because of the actions of people hundreds of years ago. What a complete and utter melt he is. You might have also noticed though during the BBC's clip that they stated these football players did a little bit of virtue signalling for the NHS as well, which, you know, I don't agree with. The minute's silence should have simply have been for the people who have died, if that is something they wanted to do, though they never do that usually weekly for the thousands of people that die every week in this country, including fans of these clubs. So, like I said, it is just a bit of virtue signalling for social media and the TV, as we have seen from far too many companies in recent weeks, which I hope actually lose a lot of their customers for. But I think what I've shown here definitely justifies the title of Premier League Cringe, because this was the Premier League of cringe, if you ask me. Now, as always, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who supports the channel, and my other social media links are down in the video description if you want to come and support me on Twitter, BitChute, and a variety of other platforms, including my second YouTube channel. As I said, all links are down in the video description.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.